folks, this is Pastor Mike Hoggard coming to you from Watchman Studios with another Watchman video broadcast. Take a look up on the screen. Aliens from Sweden. Who in the world would believe that, right? Okay. But believe it or not, this is a race, and I think the Bible bears that out. A race of alien beings, not from Sweden, but they are referred to as the Nordic aliens because they generally appear as blonde-haired, in fact, in some cases, very fine, blondish white hair, blue eyes, very pale complected, but not necessarily like a death pale, just very white skinned type of aliens. Some of them pretty large in size. So does the Bible bear that out? Does the Bible tell us that such a race even exists? I believe it does, obviously, or I wouldn't be sitting here talking about it. Let's go to Ezekiel chapter 1 for a little bit to get our bearings straight on this. In Ezekiel chapter 1, we've used Ezekiel 1, and of course, Ancient Aliens and Eric von Daniken and a lot of other UFO people have used Ezekiel 1. They have inaccurately described Ezekiel 1 as extraterrestrial spaceship with the alien creatures in it. I watched von Daniken talk the other day. You know, he said he was raised a strict Catholic. He said he believed in God, believes maybe still in God, but he said the God of the Bible doesn't make sense. If God is God, he's not riding in a spaceship and so on, which is what you find in Ezekiel 1. Now, the scripture says in the book of Psalms, the chariots of the Lord are 20,000 even thousands of angels. Now, I can't sit here and tell you that I know why God chooses to ride in a chariot. I don't know that I know the answer to that. I just know what the Bible says. So von Daniken uses the Bible, but he don't believe it, not the way we would express it. He says he still believes in God, but he doesn't believe that this is him, because why would God ride a chariot? Well, we'll leave that up to God to answer that question. But there is absolutely no doubt who this is in Ezekiel chapter 1. So we look at the direction that Ezekiel was looking when God made his presence known, riding this particular living vehicle. Ezekiel chapter 1 verse 4, and I looked and behold, a whirlwind came out of the north, a great cloud and a fire enfolding itself, and a brightness was about it, and out of the midst thereof as the color of amber out of the midst of the fire. Now we skip on down to verse 26, because he says, above the firmament that was over their heads, meaning the four living creatures with the wheels, was the likeness of a throne, as the appearance of a sapphire stone. And upon the likeness of the throne was the likeness as the appearance of a man above upon it. Now we know, because the rainbow was over this, and Ezekiel said this was the likeness of the glory of the Lord, then we know then that this man sitting on there was, in fact, the Lord. He's sitting on his throne, riding his chariot of cherubims. His chariot literally made of living creatures we call angels. Okay, the four living creatures, the four beasts is how John describes it in the book of Revelation. But the curious idea is that they came from the north. And as we are moving through this series dealing with Nordic aliens, we're finding from the scriptures that the north, number one, is a literal physical direction in this three-dimensional world. But from the Bible, we get the idea that the north just kind of keeps on going. Goes to the very top of the earth and then beyond that. In other words, far out into the heavens, the second heavens, more than likely into the third heaven. So when you have the north described in the scriptures, you're basically going off-world, going into the heavens itself. Now, let's back up a little bit because it's been a while since we touched on this issue. We had the Red River Prophecy Conference that we did. We had the one in Pea Ridge that we did, the one in Northfield, Minnesota with Pastor Cooley. So it's been a few broadcasts ago that we dealt with this. But let me kind of go back and remind you of some of the events that we discussed in dealing with or understanding these Nordic aliens. First of all, we have Travis Walton back in the 70s. This is a newspaper article about the event. Arizona man captured by UFO. 5 witnesses pass lie test while they were claiming this. You remember the story. Travis Walton was a woodsman working with a crew of guys in New Mexico. They were clearing brush. They had a contract. And they saw what they dubbed a fire in the sky because sometimes they knew lightning would strike trees. These trees would catch on fire. So as they were leaving this particular forest that evening, they saw red glow up in the treetops, and they thought, uh-oh, we got a lightning strike here, a fire in the sky. So they were going to investigate that to report it to the Forestry Service. There was a forest fire. When they got there, they didn't see a fire in the trees. They saw a hovering craft. Travis Walton immediately jumps out. You ask him today, do you regret that? He said, yeah, in a way I do. But he jumped out. He wanted to investigate. He wanted to see what this was. That fascinated him. So he runs over there to it. This thing zaps him, holds him up in the air for a few seconds. He drops to the ground, apparently dead. His guys drove off. That scared the daylights out of them. They figured, we're going to get zapped next. This is like, War of the Worlds here. But then they decided to turn around and go back and get Travis. Well, they go looking for Travis. Travis is gone. Then, they had to report to the sheriff. Sheriff said, come on, boys, you killed him. Tell us the truth. They went out looking, had dogs, cadaver dogs out there, searching the woods for days. The state police was involved, trying to get these guys to admit that they didn't believe the story. He was taken by a UFO. Come on, really? But apparently he was. He was missing for 5 days, and then all of a sudden, he shows back up again. He remembers being on the ship. He's in this room with these little gray aliens, which really freaked him out. So he jumped off the table. They ran down the hallway. He went the opposite direction, ends up in this room, and he sees that he's in some kind of ship in space. He hears a noise behind him. He turns around. He sees this helmeted man. He's going, oh, good, a human, finally. Blonde-haired, blue-eyed, light-complected, beautiful-looking guy. And he leads him to what looks like a big hangar full of, he sees all these little ships out there. And then he sees 2 other of these Nordic-looking aliens, and then a blonde woman. She's holding a mask in her hand. They lay him down on a table, put the mask on him. He passes out. Next thing he knows, he's laying face down in the road. He looks up. He sees the ship leaving. He sees a light down the road. He walks down there. It's a gas station. He knows where he is. He calls his buddy. It's Travis. They can't believe it. So they pick him up, take him to the hospital. He had been gone 5 days, completely dehydrated. No food. He hadn't drank in 5 days. Had 5 days beard on his face. And that's what he told everybody. This is what I saw. This is what happened. He's taken numerous polygraph examinations since that time. Passed most of them. I think there was one where they kind of had a question about it. But apparently it happened. Okay, so can this even even be possible? So I put some thought into this here a while back, and I presented this in a certain way at the church at Pea Ridge, Arkansas, and I'm going to present it to you this way. Let's examine what God warned the Israelites against all throughout the Old Testament. God was always telling the Israelites, don't go after these gods. Don't go worshiping them. Don't learn their religion. Don't study their temples. Don't read their books. Cast down their idols, and so on and so on. So let's look at what God said to Israel concerning these gods. Deuteronomy 17, if there be found among you within any of thy gates, which the Lord thy God giveth thee, man or woman, that hath wrought wickedness in the sight of the Lord thy God in transgressing his covenant, and hath gone and served other gods, and worshipped them, either the sun or moon, or any of the host of heaven, there it is, which I have not commanded, and it be told thee, and thou hast heard of it, and inquired diligently, and behold, it be true, and the thing certain that such abomination is wrought in Israel, then shalt thou bring forth that man or that woman which hath committed that wicked thing unto thy gates, even that man or that woman, and shalt stone them with stones till they die. Remember, God put it in the commandments. I'm a jealous God. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. God told Israel that. He then warned them, when you go into Canaan land, you're going to find out that they have other gods. I'm warning you now, don't worship them. And it's not that, God has a inferiority complex and he needs to be worshiped, or he doesn't feel good about himself. God knows these other gods. He knows them. They are in fact devils, evil angels. He knows what they're capable of, and he knows that they're up to no good when it comes to mankind. They hate God. They hate us. And because I think the Bible says that God is going to, even though we're made a little lower than the angels, he's going to exalt us. We're going to be judging angels. We know the plan of Lucifer, to exalt himself above the stars of God, to sit on the throne of God. So God knows then the nature of these gods, and he says, don't worship them. I'm telling you this for your own good. Don't worship them. And he has to impose a penalty on them in case they do, in order to enforce his law. He's not trying to be mean to them. He's giving them a warning. Stay away from them. Deuteronomy 13:13, certain men, the children of Belial, are gone out from among you, and have withdrawn the inhabitants of their cities, saying, let us go and serve other gods which ye have not known. Then shalt thou inquire and make search and ask diligently, and behold, if it be truth, and the thing certain that such abomination is wrought among you, thou shalt surely smite the inhabitants of that city with the edge of the sword, destroying it utterly, and all that is therein, and the cattle thereof, with the edge of the sword. Deuteronomy 32:17, they sacrificed unto devils, not to God, to gods whom they knew not, to new gods that came newly up, whom your fathers feared not. Now God's connecting them with the devil. He says these gods are devils. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the word evil and the word devil are but one letter difference. I think etymologically it would make sense. These devils are, in fact, evil. They're not good. They have an evil intent, an evil purpose, and God says, I'm warning you not to worship them. I'm going to have to get you if you do, because you don't trust these gods. I know them. God, the God, was always good to his people. So he says to them, stay away from them. They're devils. Judges chapter 2, verse 1, an angel of the Lord came up from Gilgal to Bochim and said, I made you go up out of Egypt and have brought you into the land which I swear unto your fathers. And I said, I will never break my covenant with you. And ye shall make no league with the inhabitants of this land, and ye shall throw down their altars. But ye have not obeyed my voice. Why have you done this? Wherefore I also said, I will not drive them out from before you, but they shall be as thorns in your sides, and their gods shall be a snare unto you. Now that is very, very close. In fact, they connect to what the Apostle Paul was saying happened to him. In 2 Corinthians 12, we know that God gave Paul these revelations, gave him the knowledge of the mystery. The mystery is Christ came from heaven down to this earth, God among us, lived our life without sin, became the sacrifice for sin, was crucified, buried, rose again, preached to the captives who were in prison in the lower parts of the earth, set captivity free, ascended to the right hand of the Father, and he's coming again. Amen. Okay, that's the mystery. It's not a secret anymore. Plain as day. But Paul had been given this by God himself, and Paul was, in his nature, very arrogant. I mean, here's a guy doesn't need a wife, okay? So you can't tempt him with most other sins, but pride was his issue. And so here's God giving Paul all these revelations, and he knows then Paul's nature. So he gives him a thorn in the flesh. And Paul said, because in 2 Corinthians 12:7, through the abundance of the revelations, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger, it's angel, of Satan, to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure. So thorn in the flesh. Here we had it in Judges, that these gods, their gods, was going to be a thorn in your side. Their God shall be a snare unto you. And God said, don't follow after them. And here's what's just very interesting, is that if you believe even some of the UFO/alien stories that are out there, then you know that a lot of the people who follow after these UFOs and these aliens, they're wanting their technology. They're wanting their ability to fly from point A to point B in space almost in the blink of an eye. There's been reports by those who claim they've been abducted that these aliens have healed people of diseases, healed people of cancer, healed people of, one man claims that he was healed by an alien of deafness. Okay? We know from the book of Job just how much power the devil has over the human body. He can both inflict pain and relieve it. I remember reading one lady. She was abducted. She found herself on the table. They were jamming all kinds of stuff into her. She was screaming bloody murder, in a lot of pain. This alien touched her, and immediately all of her pain went away. On top of when he touched her on the forehead, she had this intense love for the alien. Okay? So these are gods, all right, and worshiping them, following after them, wanting what these gods can provide for mankind, that's the trap that they're setting right now. You have Dr. Stephen Greer with his CE5, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, which means human-initiated contact. And to me, I'm going, don't you people, aren't you going to wake up to this? That here's this allegedly advanced civilization that is visiting our planet, but for some reason, the only way we can contact them is by using ancient occult methods. In other words, going into a trance, meditating, saying the word Om, chanting, using forbidden prayer practices. Okay? For some reason, that's the only way they'll show up. These are not little green men from Mars who have ray guns and, advanced technology. These are devils. Plain and simple. These are the gods that God said they will be a snare on you. They're laying a trap right now, and people are falling into it. Psalm 82, verse 6, I have said ye are, this is the fall now of the gods. This is what is going to happen. Has already, in a limited sense, happened. It's going to happen one day on a grand scale. Revelation 12 speaks of it. Revelation 6 speaks of it. Matthew 24, the book of Joel talks about it. Isaiah 13, these gods are falling one of these days. They're going to all fall down from the sky. Psalm 82, 6, I've said ye are gods, all of you are children of the Most High, but ye shall die like men and fall like one of the princes. Again, Revelation 6, and I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. The stars of heaven fell into the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. So we know these gods, because, I've shared this several times since last year, that the whole idea of, okay, if these are UFOs and these are spirits, how in the world do they crash? Well, God allows them to. God allows them to fall, and these are who would be immortals, God allows them to die like men. Revelation 12, there appeared another wonder in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads, and his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. The dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. So down in verse 7, there was a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon fought and his angels and prevailed not, neither was, that's the original Star Wars. Makes you think about it, doesn't it? Because Lucas says, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Wars in heavens, right? That's here. Prevailed not, neither was there any place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Now, from the scriptures, and we did some of this when we first started this series on the Nordic aliens. We know from the scriptures that these gods, these angels, can take on various forms. Some like dragons and serpents, some like lions, some like lambs and oxen, some like eagles, other animals, owls, ravens, bitterns, things like that. We have the satyrs mentioned in the Bible. But then we have those that look human. So I want you to think then, because it depends on where you go in the world. Some places in the world you go where they have depictions of gods. They're weird-looking creatures, big eyes, things like that. But then, in the old Roman and Greek gods, primarily, what did they look like? Here is some of these gods. Zeus, holding his lightning in his hand. Apollo, he's a sun god. Notice that his head is glowing. And they are very blonde-headed, fair-complected gods, aren't they? This is, on the left is Dionysus. His related god is Bacchus, and they're the god of wine. Blonde-haired, very fair-complected, very pretty gods. Bacchus and Dionysus, The idea behind them is that they are sort of androgynous. They have a male appearance and a female appearance simultaneously. Okay, think about that. Here on the right, we have the goddess Calypso. Calypso means covered, hidden, concealed. Cue the music. Dun, dun, dun. Because we know who that is, don't we? This Revelation 9 page, I have to turn it twice. Okay, I've read it so much. Revelation 17, Calypso. You remember Jacques Cousteau, right? His ship that he went around looking for all these creatures in the deep of the sea was called the Calypso. John Denver wrote a song about it. And it's named after the goddess Calypso. Calypso means covered, hidden, concealed. Well, this is Mystery Babylon the Great. Mystery. Because the true identity of these gods, or let's say of these aliens, to say that Stephen Greer and all of his company is deceived is an understatement. They are grossly deceived. Whitley Strieber, deceived, completely deceived. When I first heard about Strieber and I haven't read his book from cover to cover, I've read portions of it. They made a movie about it, and I thought surely this guy would be like so much in hatred of these aliens. And then I heard him years ago on the internet. He had like a little blog, a podcast. I think even before podcasts were podcasts. And so I listened to it, and I thought, well, maybe he's a Christian, because he's talking about God and things like that. But you listen to him, and he is like all in for these aliens, even though they've abducted him, shoved things in him, violated him 6 or 7 times. He is all in for them. He has been so totally deceived. And a lot, I would say most of the people who don't know the Bible, who follow the UFO thing, are grossly deceived. They have no clue what it is they're dealing with. No idea whatsoever. Tom DeLonge, Luis Elizondo, those who were part of ATIP, now part of To the Stars Academy, they're all wanting to gain something, either military or religious or philosophical from them, but they're going after these gods. So anyway, blonde-haired, blue-eyed gods. The Nordic gods, okay, like Frigg and Thor and Odin. Of course, naturally, they're going to be blonde-haired, blue-eyed, but human-looking, okay? Then, even though the word Quetzalcoatl means plumed serpent or feathered serpent, flying serpent, that's what it is, Quetzalcoatl was as much featured as a human-looking, blonde-haired, blue-eyed male as he was a dragon. Take a look at this. Here's 2 different depictions of Quetzalcoatl. You can see the serpent connection there in both of those. There on the right, I don't know any Spanish, but I can understand a few words, but that's Quetzalcoatl there. And notice he's bearded, and understand that there wasn't very many men who lived in Mexico, Central and South America that could grow beards, facial hair. It's just not common, full beards, I mean, amongst those men. It's their genetics. So when they speak of a bearded god, it's unusual. Which is why when the conquistadors came over, these European, Spanish, and Portuguese conquistadors came over, some of these guys thought they were their gods, because apparently Quetzalcoatl and Kukulkan said, "We'll be back." Okay? Here is another depiction of Quetzalcoatl. You have all these brown people falling down and worshiping him. He's a serpent god, and yet he is blonde-haired, blue-eyed, bearded. Viracocha, same thing. Viracocha was their god who gave them technology. He taught them, according to their legend, about how to grow the idea of corn, like corn on the cob that we eat now, was unheard of for hundreds, thousands of years. And all of a sudden, these people down in Central and South America have figured out how to hybridize what used to be corn, little small cobs with these little seeds on them. And I don't know what process they did, but all of a sudden now they've got these big ears of corn, something that can last them a whole year, something they can live on for a long time. And according to their story, they got it from Viracocha. They got technology from the gods. See, the thing that hath been is the thing that shall be, and there literally is no new thing under the sun. This was dug up in a grave in Peru. And again, I'm sure the archaeologist digging this up, and he's going, where in the world did they get the idea that these people had blue eyes? Because nobody down in Peru has blue eyes. Okay, it's not a racist statement, it's just they're just brown people. So what? Big deal. So to find depictions of blue-eyed people in that area was quite unusual. It's not heard of before. All right? So then we remember Betty Andreessen. And I did a whole series on her and these little grays and all the deceptions and the fact that she touched her forehead, she fell under whatever. She's the one that brings Christianity into the whole alien thing because she still believes she is a sincere, born-again Christian. But she said she had several encounters with these tall, white-haired angels whom she called the elders. One time at a Pentecostal church service where she, quote, received the gift of tongues. Two of these elders were in the church at that time. These elders were always accompanying her every time she was summoned to go stand before the One. And that comes from the book that she wrote, The Lifting of the Veil. Remember this, how she described a ritual that these quote-unquote elders performed. The elders revealed that they are the ambassadors of O, which was the internal, external, and eternal presence. Now, I can't help but think the connection between the God O and the chant that people use all the time, Om. I do think there's a connection there. Anyway, back during one encounter with the elders, Andreessen said that 6 of them formed a circle, raised their arms with their palms upward, and a beam of light came out of their foreheads, forming 2 interconnected triangles which made a hexagram. As they bowed their heads, a circular rim of light surrounded all 6 elders. They began chanting in low voices, "Oh, oh." The H sounded at the end was like a release of power from the mouth. How do you release power from your mouth? The ritual of the elders performed had the effect of using energy rings of amber-colored light, creating a large bluish-purple orb of light. The elders handed Andreessen the purple orb to carry while they journeyed to go see the One. As I held the large purple orb, I could see and sense something was definitely moving inside this strange ball of light, this mysterious orb which had been created through the 6 elders' praise to O. I mean, she has fallen for this hook, line, and sinker. That's her God now. The One is. And if you want to go back and watch the series I did about her, about how she described the Godhead, the Trinity, are you kidding me? Nothing about that, of what she said, was biblical, even close to being biblical. So she's been deceived, and she is in the process of deceiving many others. So that kind of covers some of the ground we've covered so far. But let me then throw in this story A woman by the name of Paula Harris. Let me go into a little detail about her. She was born in Italy, but lives, I think, sometimes in Italy, sometimes United States. Speaks fluent Italian, fluent English. In her English, you would never know she was Italian. She worked with J. Allen Hynek. If you know that name, he was the one who ran Project Blue Book for the Air Force during the 50s and 60s. And Hynek was the skeptic astronomer who didn't believe in UFOs, and after Project Blue Book spent the last years of his life going around telling everybody they're real. Well, Paula Harris worked with J. Allen Hynek until his death, interviewed him several times. I think they worked on some books together, I'm not sure. But then Harris also connected with Colonel Philip Corso. You remember him. He is the one who wrote the book The Day After Roswell. His first-hand knowledge, he was handed, Corso, I think, and Harris got along because Corso was stationed in Italy during the occupation after World War II. Our American Allied forces occupied Germany, occupied Japan, occupied Italy to, number one, help rebuild those nations, number two, stabilize them, number three, to make sure that we never have to fight them again. Okay, so there's treaties now with all these countries where Americans have Air Force bases and military bases in those countries. Strategically, smart idea. So Corso knew Italian, obviously had to speak it. And so Harris met him at Roswell. I think he was there talking about his book, Day After Roswell. And so Paula Harris has been a UFO researcher most of her life. She's known some of these people who have had firsthand knowledge. And Corso, remember, was given, once he went to work at the Pentagon, he was handed over a file cabinet full of technology from the crash ship at Roswell by General Trudeau. Trudeau was retiring. He knew he could trust Corso, and he said, Corso, get this stuff in the hands of some American companies, have them figure out what it does, have them figure out how we can use it. We'll let them have patents on it for their own technology, but we want it for the military. And even then, let me tell you something, even then Trudeau said, we can't trust CIA. Because Trudeau knew that CIA had been infiltrated back then from Russians, Soviet, now China. CIA, understand CIA, Central Intelligence Agency of the United States of America, not always in the best interest of the United States of America. Kennedy was right in wanting to dismantle the CIA. And you remember Eisenhower, before his last day in office, warned of the military-industrial complex, okay, of which the CIA is a part of it. So anyway, here's why I bring this up. Take a look at this. This is a Nordic god, a Nordic alien called Antarrel. He has made several appearances, blonde-haired, blue-eyed. It's about 10 feet tall. So let me give you the connection between Paula Harris and Antarrel. 2014, UFO researcher Paula Harris experienced an encounter with Antarrel, nearly 10 feet tall. She said, for 3 days on Mount Shasta, we surrounded the planet with light, chanting Om and meditating and praying for peace. Again, do they not have radios? I mean, they're advanced, right? We would be considered an advanced race of beings to maybe some people who live in the Amazon basin, but we still know how to write things down on paper, right? I mean, come on. We know how to communicate in a primitive manner, but for some reason, this advanced race, you have to chant Om in order to get their attention. You can't just call them on the radio, the phone, can't write a letter. I mean, it doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. So we're not talking science stuff here as far as these aliens are concerned. We're dealing with spirits. And for the most part, these spirits have a beast nature about them. They're not as advanced in certain ways as many are led to believe because of the way you have to communicate with them. So you have all these people, Mount Shasta. A guy in our church said he's been to Mount Shasta. He said it's an awesome place. Okay, Mount Shasta has been known by New Agers for years as being some sort of magic mountain where these energies are and stuff like that. So they're sitting around in a circle for 3 days, chanting Om, meditating, surrounding the planet with light. Really? If you want to surround the planet with light, just wait for the sun to come up and preach the gospel to them. Around 22:30 p.m., that's military time, it's 10:30, the night of the autumn equinox. I'm going to address that in a minute. Ricardo asked us to do an almost unusual, this is Paula Harris's from her website, an unusual exercise. We were to chant Om in the sand flats under the stars, not using any flashlights, with no full moon, total darkness. People, think about it. They need total darkness. Why? They don't like light. We were then to disperse and walk in a limited area for 1.5 hours. Antarrel had invited 2 more ladies, and all 3 of us held hands, walking toward a corner of the dark forest on Mount Shasta. From far away, I saw a light mist rise from the ground on the left side of a spruce tree. Ricardo explained to me that a portal had opened called a Zendra or Shendra, depending on how it's pronounced. Harris described him as glowing, with a hoodie on and a dark outfit, speaking in a language that no one could understand. She said that his speech sounded like an echo, like someone speaking through a bullhorn, and at the end of the encounter, she could understand him saying in sort of a robotic voice, "Thank you." And here's the thing. She's, researched UFOs for most of her adult life. And when she has this encounter, she is freaking out. Even, I watched a video where Grant Cameron from Canada was interviewing her at Mount Shasta, at the site. And as they were approaching where she saw Antarrel, she was like, I'm shaking. My heart's pounding. I have to catch my breath. The emotional response that she had to meeting this thing. Okay? So this is not one race of humanity meeting another race of humanity from another planet. This is not what this is. This is a human seeing a God for the first time, a little g God. And we know, and you remember what the word Om is. I've described this. This comes from Eastern mysticism, and it's a word with no meaning. You can't attach any specific meaning to the word Om, and that's the point of it. So think of opposites here. Here's the word with meaning. And all of these words, Paul was talking about in 1 Corinthians 14, when he's talking about tongues. And, he said there's various types of things that make sounds, and all those sounds have a distinction. And we are able to understand the sound. And words that are plain to us in our language, we understand those words. The words that I've been speaking all this time, you've understood every one of them, hopefully. So the Word of God, which is Jesus, which is this book as well, no difference between them. It's understood. Om is the word that has no understanding. They say it transcends comprehension. What kind of nonsense is that? transcends comprehension. It's above understanding. It's non-understanding. It's the absence of knowledge. Well, that's called stupidity, right? No brain. But that's the point of it. So they chant. They're basically praying to the anti-word, anti-Christ. And it's just throwing out this idea. John said, you've heard that Antichrist will come. And he said, yet there are many Antichrists. There are many of them, and the spirit of Antichrist already at work here. So that to me is what the word Om is all about. It's a word, has no meaning whatsoever, and that's the point of it. It's the opposite of Jesus Christ. Now, they said they did this on the autumn equinox, and that kind of got my attention. Take a look at this. There on the right you see what's called the witch's calendar or the Wiccan calendar. Because remember what witchcraft is, the opposite of what we believe. We believe that whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. And do you have to pronounce God's name the right way? Do you have to say Yahweh or Yahuwah or Yahweh? Or, okay? Call him Jesus. And do we have to be facing a certain direction? No. Do we have to have our head bowed? No. Do we have to have our head raised? No. Do we have to speak it in Hebrew? No. Does it have to be only on certain days? No. That's the simplicity in Christ. But then you have witchcraft, which says if you want the power, you must on certain days, and you must say certain words, facing certain directions, hands making certain gestures. You know, the whole idea of yoga and the hand gestures that they give you to do, each hand gesture is like a form of a different prayer, and it represents something different. And if you don't have your hands doing the right thing, then you can't connect with the gods. What are these gods that stupid? My God isn't. Amen? He's not that dumb. I can call on him day or night, lying down, standing up, facing down, crying, smiling. I can talk to God all day long and he hears every word I say. So let me explain what the equinoxes are about. And this really gets into Daniel 2, Genesis 6, things like that. Daniel 2 is the mingled kingdom, the fourth kingdom. It's the fourth, and yet it's the fifth part of this image. The gold, the silver, the brass, the iron, which is four, but then there's another one, a fifth part. Keep that in mind. I'm not going to get to it today, but I watched Frozen 2. Good night, witchcraft. But the idea of the fourth kingdom is that they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. And so you have all these symbols. Remember the hexagram that the elders made when Betty Andreessen was watching them? It's a triangle pointing one way and a triangle pointing the other way. They were opposites. And they were joined together. So the equinox, in fact, let's look at it like this. John 11. Remember the story of Lazarus? And here's what Jesus said. John 11:9, and Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours in the day? If any man walk in the day, he stumbleth not, because he seeth the light of this world. But if a man walk in the night, he stumbleth, because there is no light in him. So he says, are there not 12 hours in the day? Well, the northern and southern hemisphere, if you're around the equator, I've found that every day there's 12 hours. Every day, every night, 12 hours. But not so beyond the equator, north or south. Because the further you get from the equator, the day and the nights get a little odd. During the summertime, the days are longer than they are during the wintertime. So it's really on 2 days of the year. where there's 12 hours in the day, 12 hours in the night. It's called the equinox. Equa means equal because it's what it means. On March 21st, September 21st, because of the position of the sun and the earth, then there are equal amount of hours in the day and the night. So I just wanted to give you that background on the symbolism of it. But to witches, the equinoxes are high holy days because of what they represent. They represent the union of the opposites, the sun and the moon, light and darkness, yin, yang, male, female. And yet look at 1 Thessalonians 5. Ye are children of the light and the children of the day. We are not of the night nor of darkness. Therefore let us not sleep as do others, but let us watch and be sober. For they that sleep, sleep in the night. They that be drunken are drunken in the night. But let us who are of the day be sober, putting on the breastplate of faith and love, and for an helmet the hope of salvation. In other words, we're not mingled that way. Okay? There's 12 hours in the day, 12 hours in the night. And there are people who are of the night, people who are of the day. We're not supposed to be with them because Paul said, you know, what concord hath Christ with Belial? What communion hath light with darkness? None. But the equinoxes represent the time when they are equal. They're joined together, in other words. Okay? So I wanted to bring that out about the equinox. We look back at this. There's actually a witch's holiday called Mabon, something like that. And it represents the joining of light and darkness, sun and moon, male and female, yin and yang. So I think that plays into the character and the nature of these Nordic aliens. Why did they have to spend 3 days? Why did they have to be chanting? And by the way, they were fasting as well. Why did they have to fast? What is it about not eating that makes the aliens comfortable with us? You see what I'm saying? It's not reasonable to think that we're just meeting an intergalactic society from somewhere for the first time and we'll figure out how to talk to one another. These are devils and they're beasts and there are things that they cannot do. And apparently one of them is pick up a phone, answer the phone call. Okay? Here's another encounter, 2015. A tube of light came down from the sky, and out of this beam came Antarrel, accompanied by a group of tall white aliens wearing, like, this is how Paula described them, like a bicycle suit, a very tight-fitting white suit. And she was told then, they've always been with you, protecting you. I know what that is. That's a familiar spirit. Familiar because they have always been with Paula Harris and everybody else on the planet. There are spirits that are very familiar with me, that would know things about me that nobody else would know. That's how they can masquerade as somebody, like someone who's going to get in contact with my dear dead Uncle Freddie. I don't have an Uncle Freddie. Well, a devil would be summoned who knows Freddie, but not Freddie. It's not Freddie. It's an imposter devil. So a familiar spirit is a spirit that is familiar with them, and that makes sense. Later in Reno, Nevada, Harris said her sleep was interrupted repeatedly every hour with a voice that said to her, "If you will lead, we will match your efforts." The message that they communicated to Harris and others is that there's going to be a war over water, that the planet is going to have an ecological disaster, and man needs to wake up fast. So now we have these gods foretelling the future. See, that's what John Mack was so striking to him when he started interviewing and then doing hypnotic regression on people who claimed they'd been abducted by aliens. He said every one of them, they all told the same story. The aliens told them that there was going to be some big catastrophe on the earth, and that the aliens were making their presence known because they were going to help mankind get through that catastrophe. The children, the 62 children at the Ariel Elementary School in Zimbabwe, who saw the great alien, the ones who locked eyes with them, these aliens were beaming images into these children's minds like the end of the world, like all the forests were on fire, the animals were going to die, the earth was in danger because of what the humans were doing to it, stuff like that. Like, you know, the people who are saying, you know, the ozone layer is burning up and we're destroying, you know, we're having global climate change. Global cooling. No, it's global warming. No, it's changing now. We don't know what it's doing, but it's bad. It's going to get worse. It's terrible. So now you have the aliens who are telling all the people that a bad, very bad thing is going to happen on the earth, and they're going to be our saviors throughout all of that. Does that sound something like what would be in the Bible? You better believe it. Terrible things are going to happen. And these gods are going to get kicked out of heaven. They're going to come down here and they're going to say, we were sent here to help facilitate the reshaping of your planet. A new, would you? In fact, there's a story that Corso told Paula Harris. Paula Harris helped Colonel Corso write another book. I never had it published. It's just like public domain, and you can find a copy of it free online. I have it. And it's called The Dawn of a New Age. And he relates a story when he was working at the, I think it was Holloman Air Base or one of the air bases back during the Cold War days when they had nuclear weapons at this particular base and they had their radars on to protect the base. Well, apparently that's what caused the Roswell ships, multiple ships, to crash, was the radars. And Corso was told that there had been some UFO sightings out at a cave just off the base. So he drove out there. And he said, coming out of this cave was this little gray alien. And he was communicating with Corso in his mind, and the alien was telling Corso, will you please turn off your radar so we can leave? And Corso, pragmatic man, he had, like I say, he worked after World War II in Italy, and he said, what's in it for me? According to Colonel Corso, the alien said to him, a new world, if you'll have it, or if you'll take it, or something like that. In other words, we can give you a new world if you're willing. Okay? So now we bring in this whole New World Order thing to the alien connection. And it's biblical. These are the gods that are going to come down like a flood. Okay? To change this world. Remember, she mentioned that Antarrel, which she said he was like 10 feet tall. Big, tall thing. That he appeared in a Zendra or Shendra. And I did a little research on that. It's like a portal opens up. There's this mist there. Remember Land of the Lost? So those of you who remember the Land of the Lost, Saturday morning TV show, okay, Enoch, the Slee Stacks, and they went through the portal and there was a mist there, all right? 2 Peter, these are wells without water, clouds that are carried with a tempest, to whom the mist of darkness is reserved forever. Remember the false prophet that Paul confronted in Acts 13? Paul told him, now behold, the hand of the Lord is upon thee, And thou shalt be blind, not seeing the sun for a season. And immediately there fell on him a mist and a darkness, and he went about seeking some to lead him by the way. See, a mist represents covering and darkness and secrecy, like Calypso. The mist covers. If things are foggy, you can't see it clearly. And so it's been more than one occurrence where some of these aliens showed up or some of these tall whites showed up, and they're in this mist, this fog, magic fog, I guess, something like that. And they show up shrouded like that. Think of the opposite of that. When God appeared to the Israelites in the Old Testament, pillar of cloud by day, pillar of fire by night. That was to protect the Israelites. From who? From God's glory. If God appears to them without being covered in the cloud, they die. So it was for their protection. But this mist, I think it's to cover them somehow, to shroud them in secrecy. Then, so I'm trying to relate what Paula Harris saw to what's in the Bible. The idea that it was on the equinox, the idea that he appeared in this mist, okay? And then, why is it that this advanced race of people have to dress in robes and wear hoods? Why? That is exactly what the witch at Endor saw when she saw who she described as, or what Saul perceived as Samuel. 1 Samuel 28:12. When the woman saw Samuel, she cried with a loud voice, and the woman spoke to Saul, saying, Why hast thou deceived me? For thou art Saul. The king said unto her, Be not afraid, for what sawest thou? And the woman said unto Saul, I saw gods ascending out of the earth. And he said unto her, What form is he of? And she said, An old man cometh up, and he is covered with a mantle. Remember the elders that Betty Andreessen saw? Old men? An old man cometh up, and he is covered with a mantle. And Saul perceived that it was Samuel, and he stooped with his face to the ground and bowed himself. Look at Psalm 109:29. Let mine adversaries be clothed with shame, and let them cover themselves with their own, there it is, their own confusion, as with a mantle. So the mantle is like the mist. It's like the fog. It's a covering, lest you see what they really are or who they really are. I remember at one point Whitley Strieber was asking some of these aliens, why don't you let me see what you really look like? And they said, you're not ready for that. They're hiding something. So, you know, that begs the question, is this really what these devils look like? Or do they make themselves into this to appear this way to man so it doesn't freak man out? Well, that's a good question. It's not one that I have an answer to yet. But this is the way that they're choosing to appear. And this is similar to how Betty Andreessen described them as well. They're wearing robes, they're wearing a mantle, a hood, to cover their appearance, to cover their bodies. Psalm telling us that they're covering themselves with their own confusion as with a mantle. And if you go and listen to Paula Harris's story, a lot of confusion there. She says, I don't understand the protocol. I don't understand how we're supposed to do this. But to me, it's just interesting that in order to contact these alien entities, advanced race of superior beings, that we have to use religious practices that go back thousands of years, that God told the Israelites, I don't want you ever doing that stuff. Because you're going to pull things through to this world that you're not going to like. Okay? So, next week, I'm going to bring up the name Blavatsky. Crowley. Ring a bell? And their connection with these Nordic gods, they referred to them as the Great White Brotherhood. Dun, dun, dun. Get ready for that one. And then we'll study some more. We'll get into the Frozen 2 movie. Okay? Because it connects with this spot on. Okay? And it connects with Scripture, ties it in with the religion of witchcraft, which is essentially what all of this is. Remember, magic is no more than misunderstood technology. And if we were to go back with some of our simple technology now, go back 100 years, 150 years, show it to people, ye be witchcraft. Okay? That's what we're dealing with. And they're bringing it to mankind. Mankind is not going to do well with it. All right? It's always a joy to be with you. You're the reason why we do what we do here. We thank you for your love, your support, your prayer, your support for us, support for the people that we try to help in Kenya. We appreciate that. Continue to pray for us. We love you. God bless you. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.